Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to my friend, business partner, and all around fabulously impressive individual, Christopher Nelson. Christopher has been a part of 3 out of 5 companies that have gone IPO in the tech space. And he has a book coming out called No Dough to IPO. And Christopher was kind enough to let me get a pre-read of the first little bit. And I said, this is absolute gold. As you guys know, listening into my podcast, I like spending a lot of time talking about wealth mindset. And what better way than to welcome someone like Christopher onto the podcast? So, Christopher, welcome.
Oh my
Please.
gosh, Brian, I am so excited to be here, right? Since we started working together, we just have this shared appreciation for this mindset that says we have to break out of the norm. We have to look at a broader picture and not, take this, the story that we're being given. We have to look outside and we have to be intentional. Like we have to make our own moves. Nobody's going to make it for us. So I am super pumped to be on this podcast and share as much as I can with the listeners.
So where I want to start is actually a quote from your book, which is, I'm going to kind of combine 2 of them. So 2 quotes. One is always work for equity. And another is I am the asset. Treat my time and talent as an asset. And I merge both of those because to attack this mindset issue of that I personally was a victim of, and a lot of middle-class folks get stuck in this rut of exchanging time for money, right? So even if you're a doctor, for example, at a hospital or private practice, if you don't actually have equity in that, everything you're making is ordinary income, and you're not truly building wealth like equity does. And for those tuning in who are not familiar with Christopher does this in the tech space, which is interesting because you would think getting a tech job wouldn't necessarily come with equity. Chris, spend some time catching folks up to speed around this concept of working for equity.
Well, quite honestly, Ryan, the concept of working for equity inside of technology companies has been around since the 70s, right? In the sense that a lot of these companies, as they were starting up and they had these ideas, could not pay, even at that point, software engineers were highly skilled resources. The way that they had to compensate them was because they wanted to provide them lower salaries, was giving them equity in the company. And so this has evolved over time, and it's very predominant in the Silicon Valley that when you go to work for a startup company, you get equity. Now, what people don't realize is that companies that were started that way, as they transition to become public companies, they operate the same way as well. And what I want to try and bring people's awareness to is the fact that you can go to work, the lowest risk, equity proposition there is going to work for a Google, Facebook, Lyft, somebody that's already public, and you already know the value of their stock price. You can go and get a salary, a bonus, and equity, and be a part owner in that company and get liquidity in some of those companies as soon as the first month of employment. And that's and guess what? You don't have to be a coder. You can be a accountant. You can be a salesperson. You can be a marketing person, and they will train you to do what you need to do, and you can get equity.
That's so interesting because, well, first off, we all have heard the story of Steve Jobs ordering pizza and not really having cash to pay for it. So offering the guy equity for pizza, and of course he declines, and then all the math nerds go out and say, well, that's worth X number of millions of dollars now, which is funny. But you make this argument, which is look at companies as investments. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Right. I mean, so let's go back to you are the asset, right? And again, this is based on my story. And what I didn't realize is I worked for 10 years for a public company, Accenture, and I built up this phenomenal set of skills, and I was getting some equity. So they had an employee stock purchase program. So I actually did okay in that particular investment as well. But I had built up this set of skills that was very, very desirable by startup companies. And so when I went, I realized that I'm sitting down at a table with a negotiation. They want my skills. they have, salary, bonus, and equity. So then that is really the exchange, as I have the value. And this to me is, I think it's actually more powerful to be an employee in work for equity than it is to be an owner, in the sense that you have more freedom, right? I can go and I can work at this company for a year, 2 years. It's not going well. I can go take my equity and I can go work somewhere else, versus an owner who now has, investors and shareholders. The expectation is that they're going to be there for 10, 15, 20 years. Now, when I had that realization, okay, I'm the asset, I'm investing it. And guess what? When I went and made my first investment in 2009, and I left Accenture and I went to work for my first startup company, failure, I failed. Why was that? Because like many people, I made an emotional decision. I didn't realize I was burnt out, I was stressed. And instead of actually thinking like an investor, emotions were ruling reason. And I all of a sudden made a very emotional decision, and I got married to the vision of what this company could become and what somebody was telling me. And I didn't look at it as an investment. So what I did the second time around is, first and foremost, I actually looked at what are the products, like what is actual product, how's it competing in the market? What's the total addressable market? The same way that many people evaluate stocks. The same way that I know Warren Buffett looks at stocks. Then you look at the leadership team. Is it an experienced CEO or is it a startup CEO? If it is a startup CEO, who are they surrounding themselves with? Do I see winners on the team, people who have that healthy scar tissue that have gone through these events before? Then, I go through a series of it's essentially a due diligence criteria, the same way that you and I would go and look at a mobile home park. I lay out in my book this selection criteria of due diligence that says, what do I do? And even before that, let's even look at a risk profile that says, wait, do I want to go for high risk, high reward? Do I want to do an opportunistic ground up build? Or do I actually want to go for something that's more of a core plus? Maybe it's a company that's just gone public. I can get liquidity right away, but there's still a lot of upside because they're on the way to becoming $1 billion company.
There's so much to talk about around your story. One thing that stood out to me was, and you bolded this, so it's hard to miss, is change of location plus change of pace equals change of perspective, which yes. I'm looking forward to when the book actually comes out, reading about your journey in more detail, because it sounds like you went through a really tough time that forced you to introspect, to look inwards, to ask, who am I? Where do I want to be? Where am I going? Which I believe is the foundation for what comes next. Where do I want my time and my talent to go in exchange for equity?
That's right. That's right. And so I went from, what I didn't realize at the time is I was surrounded by phenomenal mentors when I was at Accenture and given great career opportunities, to what I talk about in my book is grow my career capital. Career capital is your education, your experience, and your results. I was building phenomenal career capital. What happens in technology companies is we get to a point where we experience burnout and we don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to raise our hand and say, I'm burnt out, I don't know what to do. And honestly, the culture has changed over time, where for a while you were supposed to just, what I call eat fire, just consume it. And so when I made that emotional decision and I thought I was moving towards something that was amazing, I was really running from fear. And so I ended up, within a year, I had gone from, while I was stressed out and burned out, I was surrounded by a lot of people who really cared about my career and building amazing career capital, for working for a bad boss in a very toxic environment, not knowing if I'd really actually ruined my career, right? You have these thoughts, I ruined my career. Where was I? Because I'd landed in San Diego that was away from my core network. And then I was physically, literally nursing an ulcer. And so here I thought I was going to this amazing thing. And I was mentally and physically in a very toxic environment. And the one thing that I did learn, and I think this is, for people who are pursuing a wealth mindset and want to move with intention, is that we do have to intentionally change the pace. So I had to get out of that environment for a period of time, buy yourself some time. And then I had to go to a different location. Luckily, I was in San Diego, so there's some cool beach spots there you can go and open up your mind, right? And I'd gone to university down there, so I knew a few key ones. And that really, changed that for me. But I have to be honest in the sense, and I talk about this in the book, is that the biggest changes, I knew I was okay I knew that I could figure my way out of this, and I realized what was going wrong with the situation. But everything changed for me when I actually reached out to an old mentor, and they validated the value of what I had and who I was. Once I got that validation, it was actually over LinkedIn. We were chatting. He's like, oh my gosh, I've got an opportunity for you. Your skill set is so valuable right now. All of a sudden, I went from literally this physical state of anxiety and depression to excitement, like, oh my God, like I can turn this thing around. I still have it. Oh my gosh, I was in a bad situation. And I think that adds on to, once you change your mindset, go seek out, those people that have supported you before, and help them validate this new perspective that you found.
I love that. And I want to pivot a little bit to another quote that I just loved. You said, I spent the first 10 years of my career building my skills relative to my peers in my company. Entering this world outside of that large company, I needed to understand the larger playing field. And the reason why that quote stuck with me, and why I think that's relevant to what you just brought up there, even though it's a slight aside, is that you tapped into your network. Who'd have thought? All you had to do is reach out to someone that to put it in your words, you built that career capital. In other words, the network, the skills.
Yep.
And you went on LinkedIn, for gosh sakes.
Right.
And there was an opportunity waiting for you right there.
Literally waiting for me. And that turned out to be the opportunity that then, catapulted me forward and got me out of that mess and got me moving forward again. And so, the thing is, it's so, when we're in our work, and this is why, again, the change of location, the change of perspective, time to reflect on where we are, but also, taking a look at that bigger picture of, wait, what do I have and where do people value it somewhere else, is so important, because it allows us to see opportunities that we can't always see, and this is, again, the intention of the book, and this whole concept of always working for equity. Understand what's happening in technology, because I don't even know if I shared with you the portion of the book. I think it's the following chapter, where I talk about this woman, Krishna, who was, working in marketing for a products company in Kansas. And her brother-in-law comes out and goes, oh my God, you're amazing at what you do. Like, what are you doing? She says, I don't know. I'm, waiting for this person in front of me to retire, and then I can get my next promotion. He asked her, he said, you need to come live in my basement in the Bay Area. Come live in my basement, go get a job. I'll open up my network for you. And here she came, and she started then working for, a tech company, and she got in at, I think, individual contributor level, got to a manager. The company got acquired. She had a phenomenal exit. And then all of a sudden she, became then a director at that acquired company. And then she was able to, move on finally to another company where she's, now continuing to ascend her career. But it was life-changing for her to all of a sudden go and take what she had and start working for equity. And this is, to me, is where I want people to just really realize this, is that you have skills, you have value. You need to see the broader playing field and say, where can I actually get the most for my time and my talent? Because you are the asset.
I love hearing this. And I really wish I had heard this in my early 20s. And even when I was in university, both, if nothing else, graduate, if I hadn't missed it, undergrad, because how many times have you heard that story? A really talented person is waiting for someone to die, retire, or get fired to move up, instead of taking, even if you don't want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to grow within corporate America, you have to be constantly tapping into your network, growing your network, and looking for those opportunities, because people aren't just going to find you.
No, they aren't going to find you. And the other thing is that you have to be looking for opportunities for yourself as well. Like, where can you, like, if you're great at marketing, where else can you apply those skills? And this is where, the drum that I constantly beat is, look at tech companies, especially now. Now the game has changed. I think there was some hesitation because, you think about Krishna, she moved to a high cost of living area. And it's interesting because after she reached a level of success, she then ended up moving here to Austin as well, where she's now able to, again, lower cost of living area, again, all relative. But now that tech companies are hiring remote workers, there is a phenomenal opportunity where you can live where you are right now, and you can be working for equity. Because this is what I want to, really hammer home is, Robert Kiyosaki doesn't talk about this, but I call it Kiyosaki's bridge, which is, you can actually be an employee and an owner of the company at the same time. And that's what leads to career compensation compounding. Because if you're just getting salary and bonus, it's going to inch up slowly to the right over time. Maybe there's a step function, but once you have equity component, that's where you can get logarithmic. That's where you can actually really get significant capital that then, what I encourage everyone in tech to do, if you invest all your equity, in things like, mobile home parks, then you're going to be in a much different situation in 10 or 15 years than anyone around you.
Yeah, I love that. My friend Ryan Smith just knowledge bombed me with this quote when he said, "You can't earn yourself wealthy." And I remember with one of my best friends, he was working at a bank. We were both working at banks at the time. And he was talking about starting his own company. And I was in the process of quitting and going full-time in mobile home parks. And I was going through why it made sense to cut my salary down to 35,000, lose all my benefits, lose all the health insurance and everything to go chase a dream. And the rah-rah around chasing a dream is great, but what about the money? And the right answer is, if I spend the next decade, give or take, building my own company, I have a chance at walking away with millions of dollars. If I continue to work for the bank with no equity, no one's going to randomly show up and be like, "Good job, Ryan. Here's a couple $1,000,000."
Not at all. Right. Not at all. And this is where this opportunity, because I was at this phase as well, where I thought, what is the maximum that I can get with my career? Because I built this, I wasn't ready to be an entrepreneur at that point. And so it was truly, my philosophy was, how can I actually go leverage what I have, my career capital for tech equity, and get as much as I can. And that's what has taken me on this journey. And it's there for other people as well.
It's really 100%. What also really hit home in your book, you mentioned how you had this wonderful job, great pay, great travel, and you hit burnout. For those listening in, like, how does this happen? It just, oh my gosh, I have all the money, all the travel, all the fun, all of this, I'm burned out. Can you talk a little bit about how that it's almost an inevitability in certain regards?
It really is. And part of it comes out of, passion and being a passion player. And I know for myself, it was, I had this opportunity to create a business within a business. So we, in 2004 at Accenture, we started this Salesforce.com practice, where Salesforce was this SMB business at the time. We were taking it to the enterprise. And so I came out being one of the first technical architects. So literally whatever project they were on, I was flown there, whether I lived in San Francisco, I was going to New York, Miami, you name it, and even was living overseas for a while in Japan, in Tokyo, and having a blast. And I think what it was is, I was at this stage in my career where I wanted to lean into my career. I wanted to enjoy it. I wanted to enjoy all the benefits. And I think it's just easy to over rotate, because, you get out of school. And I think for me, I graduated in 2001. And all of a sudden it happened in a 9/11. So my start date got postponed. Like, I was super, super hungry. And I finally got to the point where I was enjoying all the fruit. It's like anything else, it's like I ate too much of that fruit and I got burnt out. And the thing that people don't tell you about burnout is the fact that it hits quick. Like, you're going, and you don't realize that you're overextended, you're maxed out. And there's no playbook that says, I'm burnout, I need help. Like, how do you really talk about it? I think it's better now, but I think at that point, there wasn't. And it's also, the other thing is nobody feels sorry for you when you've also been soaking up and living this, what I call this rock star lifestyle, where you're flying everywhere and, you have all these hotel points and plane points, and it seems like the world is your oyster. nobody feels sorry for you when you say, I'm burnt out. It's like, oh, what? Everything seems so good. But when you're, thousands of miles away from home and you're isolated and, your dad gets sick and you can't be there. And, all of a sudden you realize like, wait, I'm lonely. Like, where are my friends? Where am I? It happens really quick.
Yeah, and to your point in your book, that manifests itself in unpleasant ways like ulcers, depression,
It,
anxiety, right? So in other
yeah,
words, it's almost like an intervention for any other type of substance. Workaholism, if you
right.
will, eventually has symptoms that you can't ignore anymore.
It really does, and I think that, I mean, it's also personally taken me on a journey of really focusing on self-care and knowing myself. And when I do tip over, but I think you highlighted something, really well, Ryan, is that there is anything else, like if we were over rotating on something, there would be an intervention and people would talk to you about it, where
Yeah.
somehow I think even in our society, there is a level of glorification for all of the, overwork, if you will.
Yeah, it's embedded in our culture in the United States of America relative to
Yeah.
Europe, right? We just constantly give ourselves social pressure and social rewards for those who work extra hard, who make extra money, who get to do all these glamorous things at work.
Yeah,
And we don't stop to go, well, maybe that doesn't actually make us happy.
it's true.
I
It's
want to
true.
use that to kind of transition into another really big important thing in your book, which is introspection. So I talk about introspection a lot on
Mm,
my podcast, and obviously it played a colossal role
mm.
in where you are today, how you got to where you are today. What tips do you have for listeners? What advice would you give to those who are bought into this idea of, yeah, I need to spend some time around introspection? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say it's like other things. It is a practice. Like I can say that, I was able to find that introspection and have that moment then in 2010 because of the fact that I'd sort of started the practice of introspection. And it is like other things where, and it starts a little bit with an inventory where you check in with yourself, like, how do I feel? Like, am I feeling happy most of the time? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling stressed? Understanding what that feels like. I think, I had, as a kid grew up and I had an awful temper. And so I think as an adult, and I realized in the workplace, like if I was going to advance, I couldn't do this. And I up around it, and they started really helping me understand emotions and how that translates into your physical self. And part of that was my journey of introspection and also checking in with myself, how you're doing. Because and then part of it also just came with, some journaling and being able to tell your story, right? I mean, I think part of it, for me, I wanted to know, I am learning things, I'm doing things. What does that mean in the broader scheme of my life? And so there became this practice of introspection, of getting to know myself, getting to understand what I was doing, and being able to just reflect on that and ask the pivotal question: am I going where I want to go, or am I really coasting and things are happening around me? Because I do think that, the thing that I've now been laser focused ever since 2010 in those moments was, I want to live with intention. I don't want to have my emotions rule my reason and drive me into situations, because that is what happened then.
I first off, I love hearing any story of anyone who overcame anger issues of any kind, because I don't think it gets talked about enough, but anger is unbelievably intoxicating.
Mm,
It will just make you not even see straight. And I love, so for example, Ian, my business partner, he loves meditation, and that's how he
mm.
finds his zen, if you will. Can you talk a little bit about how you address that and how you found your own zen so you could be more
Sure.
present and more rational over the strong emotions?
Over the strong emotions. Well, it's interesting that, my solution to dealing with the anger was actually, leaning more into martial arts and MMA type things, and actually finding an outlet for it. And I realized that if I went and I had these very intense workouts in the morning and I just, really let it all out, I expelled it. And I think a couple things happen, right? Physiologically, you release all these endorphins. So you enter into your day like just relaxed, and it truly creates a physical state of Zen. And then there was just always the reflection of, you know what, if something's bothering me, I'm just going to go take it on in that bag in the morning. Like, I'm just going to package it up and do that. I think the other thing is, and this is truly introspection, is trying to understand your triggers, right? I mean, I think for me, I was, I'm set off by bullies, and I'm set off by things that I think are just not just, right? I mean, those are triggers for me. And so understanding and knowing that about myself, when I can analyze a situation, now I know, like, it's appropriate if I need to remove myself, and it can be something as benign as, oh, I'm sorry, like, drank too much coffee. I'm going to go to the restroom right now, and, do a little cold water on the face, do some breathing, think about what's in the situation, and go back into that. And I just found that the more I became aware of this, and even now, right, I have a very intense and aggressive workout routine in the morning, because I want to get physically, I want to expel energy. So the rest of the day, I can be sitting here, at monitors or standing. It's a sit stand desk, so I can then be, getting, being present and being focused.
I love that idea of triggers, because it's more than just anger. It's anxiety, it's fear, it's being lazy when you should be productive. It's happiness. There are happiness triggers. And I think as human beings with biological programming, if you will, we need to put ourselves, if we want to truly be maximally happy, we need to put ourselves in situations where there are more happy triggers than things that will trigger fear, sadness, and anger, anxiety. And I want to just reiterate what you just said, Christopher. The more time you understand what brings on certain emotions within yourself, you can then make much smarter decisions about where you spend your time, with whom you spend that time, and what companies that you pick. I love hearing that. And if we could, I would love to spend a little bit about it. Another thing you bring up in your book, which is doing your due diligence on a company and picking the appropriate risk profile. So with that idea in mind, that you've taken the time to understand yourself better, you understand your triggers, not just anger and frustration and this and that, but all your triggers. You understand where you want to spend your time, with whom you want to spend your time. How do you marry that to a risk profile?
That is a very insightful question, because I think what most people don't ask themselves, and this is also why, I don't know if we've talked about this, but I'm going to be starting a podcast this year called Tech Careers and Money Talk, where I want to just facilitate this conversation, because this is where some of this, to me, it's really important that we understand our own triggers around money and safety and security, and what we really want, and we see down the road. How do we sort of, facilitate that? Because, I think for myself, I knew that I wanted to see and feel and have some equity. I wanted to get the suitcase full of cash. I wanted to get it. And so then what that made me look at is this risk profile. And what I hear, and what I continue to hear, is that, oh, if you want to make money in tech, you got to go to the earliest stage startup, the 35-person company. You got to work for 6 or 8 years, and then you're going to make tons of money. And for us in real estate, that's just like somebody saying to you, Ryan, you know what, if you really want to make money, this whole thing you got going on with mobile home parks is great, but you need to go find a patch of earth, and you need to go build something from the ground up. And you would look at them and you'd say, that's insane. Like, that's so high risk. What are you talking about? And so, so for me and for everyone out here, like, the risk profile is truly where you start. And it really comes with, again, this introspection of, how much time are you willing to work for that simple, compensation of just salary and bonus versus how do you want the equity? Because if you say to yourself, I actually want to put myself in a situation where I'm compounding now and learning how that works, and then I may learn how to address higher risk later, then you have a very focused profile of companies that are already public, that have equity as part of their compensation package. And then you're going through your due diligence, or you could still do it at a risk profile and say, what are the ones that then, are companies that have products that I want to work for, that have leadership that I want to work for, and I'm going to get my short list that way. Versus myself, I knew that I was willing to work for at least 1 to 2 years, and I could potentially make nothing because I was earlier in my career, right? This was 10 years ago. And so I was choosing what I, almost like a value add company where I said, I'm going to go do a level of work to get it over the event. And I have a very specific profile of companies that are ready to go IPO, not just talking that it's dream in the future, but they've actually got, over $130 million in revenue. They've got a leadership team that at least 1 or 2 people have experience going through an IPO, and they may have just replaced one of their execs to have that experience, like a CFO, and those types of things. That was really important for me. And so for the listeners here, it's really getting comfortable in saying, knowing yourself, I'm a W-2 employee, I want to really go to work for equity. Then how comfortable are you for working a period of time without getting that liquidity?
And that is where mobile home parks come in, because I have a friend who's probably listening in who his brother-in-law has done exactly what you've laid out, but he went for all equity. So he doesn't have any cash flow, and he is worth a lot, many zeros to this gentleman's name. But if he wants to pay his mortgage or go out to eat or buy a new car, he's got to sell stock. And because he's got to sell stock, you've got ordinary income, capital gains, all of that stuff. Whereas what's beautiful about being a limited partner in a multifamily type deal is you can sell your stock, you can have your big payday, transition some of that into something that's going to continue to pay. And that is what's really fascinated me about your book, and also about your mission, Christopher, which my understanding of it is you want to help tech people who have found that success place their money somewhere where their money can give them that income, so they can either go focus on the next startup, or they can go to the beach somewhere, or they can just not buy a Ferrari and then be broke in 5 years.
Right. And that's exactly it. Or even take a sabbatical, right? I mean, I'm still working in tech, but I was able to, with passive income, take a 9-month sabbatical, rest the brain, build out more of the, capital raising business, and then make this decision to come back. But it was all because of the fact that we had significant passive income. We'd been in a very focused, way, moving dollars from tech equity into passive income producing real estate, 100%. And that truly is part of my mission, Ryan, because what I see, and it's just exactly like your friend, is I know people who've got high 7-8 figure net worth who can't stop working, or working these very grindy jobs and are saying, they say things to me, well, wait, how can I take a sabbatical? Because I'm just going to be having to sell stock and burn through capital.
Right.
It's like, well, part of this is, the reality is, and this is why I'm here, is because I think that technology employees, quite honestly, because we make our money in equity and we make our money through a venture capital, generally speaking, a lot of the companies that go public are through, venture capital offerings. That's how they think. Like, they think the investment world is made up of that, but nobody has told them, the bond market broke in the traditional equities market. There's no income anymore. If you want income in your portfolio, you have to come to, real estate, and really start diversifying there. And this is where I think they rely on people like myself, yourself, to be, some really good operators and show them what that looks like.
So conversations you and I have had, and conversations I've had with that individual have actually led me to place my own money in LP, which is
Right.
nuts for a lot of fellow real estate investors. They're like, what are you doing? Don't you want all of your own capital to go into all your GP ventures? And the answer is no. Why? Because I may want to take a sabbatical one day. I might
Right.
want to have limited partnership income coming in over here so I can eat and have my lifestyle. And then every other dollar I want to take to the moon. Right.
Right.
So, in other words, what being a limited partner allows you to do is be able to not have to gobble up that income, that stock or that whatever to eat and pay your bills. You can
Mm.
now focus on what you're really, really good at and making your wealth.
You want to hear a great story? And
I
this is
do.
somebody who I met. No, it's actually a story about meeting someone, which introduced, somebody said, hey, you're really into investing. You need to meet, my friend over here, who he's a technology entrepreneur, but he also does real estate. He doesn't really talk a lot about it. So I met this gentleman, and he has 3 incredibly successful startups, all self-funded, all bootstrapped, all making money. And as I dig in and I get to know him, and I'm telling him about, my mission and, passive income behind it, he goes, it's important that you realize that all of these ventures that I have going right now, all of the money that I make off that is gravy. Like, my real money is, I was shown when I was a kid, I had a neighbor, and this guy bought the dirt underneath gas stations and did triple net leases on these things. And his kids didn't want anything to do with it. I went over there, took all the notes, learned from this guy. So when I got out of college, I started buying these things up too. And so now all of my family's income, all of my kids' college is all paid through passive income. So then what that allowed me to do is, it allowed me to be a better entrepreneur, because I'm playing
Yep.
loose. I'm not worried about anything back here. Family's fine. I can go and maybe take more risks, make more moves, and his companies are thriving because of it. And to me, this is the guy who I want to be like, where it's like, I want to be able to then take, more risks, be aggressive in my business, because I know that I have this financial fortress that's taking care of my family, so that I can then, really just be present in that moment, and not thinking, like that tech entrepreneur who's gone all in on his venture. Like, if I screw this up, my family's down the tubes too, right? Diversification. Yeah.
I love
Right.
that story. I love that story. And I really want you to tell your story of when you went IPO first, and specifically what your wife said when you got home. I love this
Okay.
story.
Okay. So, so when when it was that day, right? If you think about it, I had this horrible job. Then I went and I worked for a year, and I did all this due diligence and research, selected the company. Then I worked for this company for less than a year, and all of a sudden wind up on IPO day. And IPO day is amazing when you work for a Silicon Valley startup. So the executive team is on the East Coast. We were there. We get into the office at 5:30. There's, big screen TVs, DJ, omelet bar. All of a sudden, it's time to float on the stock exchange. Everybody's there. Everybody knows their number in their head. And at that point in time, they do this countdown, 3, 2, 1, and nothing happens. And everyone's going, wait, what's going on? They're texting people they know are in New York. What's happening? They're like, it's not trading yet. What this means is that that's forcing the price up. So there was the price we thought we were going to go out, and then it doubled, which is
Mm.
amazing, because it means whatever equity you thought you were going to get that was significant doubles in 2 minutes, right? I mean, that is amazing wealth. That is amazing equity. It was incredible. And as soon as it posted, right, the DJ kicks off. We have the most amazing party. In fact, I have to find this photo, because there was literally a ping pong table that was covered with these Veuve Clicquot bottles. And it is just, nerds getting hammered. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. And so after this amazing day, I'm just floating on cloud nine. I drive home. My wife is pregnant with our first son, and I'm just excited. I walk in the house, get my computer, log into the Schwab account, spin it around. I go, babe, this is where we are. And I'm just like beaming, like, what are you going to say, honey? What are you going to say? Like, and she looks at me, and just very pragmatically, like, okay, when do we get the money? When do we get the house? I had no answer. I literally went into the next room and had, my next, moment, which was, is this real? Like, what's happening? And it was the first time that I realized, again, this came from introspection later, is I didn't know what was happening, but I fell off a cliff and it was really hard for me to recover. And the next few months were very hard as I tried to get smart very quickly. But what I didn't realize is that I'd gone through a sudden wealth event. And a sudden wealth event, like if you win the lottery, you go through an IPO, it is a psychological event that when you go through it, and the party's over, right? The Veuve Clicquot, because it's nice to celebrate. I do, in hindsight, realize we were given an amazing day to celebrate that I will never forget. Tons of mini stories within that day. But you can feel anxiety. You can feel very alone. You can feel guilty because other people are doing it. And then you can feel scared, and I was feeling anxious and scared, like, is this really real? And, that was really then what created this whole journey. And I don't know if I told you, but that's literally the second book. This is going to be a trilogy. So the first book is From No Dough to IPO, which I realized, like, this is how I have to teach people, how do you go work for equity? How do you do that? Trade your time and talent for equity. The second book, though, is From IPO to Cash Flow, that came out of that moment, which is, okay, how do you actually plan for a sudden wealth event? How do you protect your money? And then how do you start producing cash flow? Because that's what started me on the journey that, eventually brought us together, which is, we as technology employees have to take half, I believe at a minimum, and move that over and start getting that passive income so that then we can, just like my buddy, take a breath and go, like, I'm good. I got dollars coming in. Now I can, get aggressive. Now I can play my own game because I'm not worried about my family. I've got a financial fortress that has them set up for success.
That's such a powerful story, Christopher. And that story alone, I really wanted to get on the podcast, and you've just delivered. I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's so important to know that a sudden wealth event is a huge deal and no one prepares you for it. And if you grew up middle class like I did, or working class, your parents are not going to be helpful. No one in my network was helpful when I hit mine. And my wife as well looked at me and she was like, that's nice. Where's the house? Where's the next paycheck coming from? Right. So it throws so much cold water on it, but that's what we have to educate ourselves on if we want to push our wealth mindset. If you truly want to be wealthy, you have to understand, unless you're really, really lucky, it's going to come from having developed some really valuable skills. And if some of those skills need to be, number one, how to have a wealth event, and number two, how to protect it. And that's what I'm so excited that you and we've come into each other's networks and as friends and business partners, because your mission in life is to help people who are about to experience that, who have experienced that and maybe necessarily didn't make the best choices, or people who are smart and wised up to the fact that, hey, look, I've spent all my life getting good with people, or good at basketball, or good at coding, or good at being a leader, or whatever. I haven't spent any time learning how to actually be wealthy.
You're right. And you're right also in this mission where both times, like when I was at Accenture and I had this, this amazing lifestyle from the outside, just the same way that nobody was going to feel sorry for me or help me. Or if you go through a sudden wealth event, and I feel like athletes, like I think that's the most common thing. When somebody gets the big contract, they've been working their whole life and they truly are the asset, right? They are that asset that then gets this big payday. People don't feel sorry for them, or they don't empathize with them or understand what they're going through. And I do, right? And I do for people like us. And it's like, wait a second, didn't come from wealth at all. You know what I mean? I didn't come from any type of background, but put it together, pulled it off, But then you're right. How do we then support and help each other move through this, get the mindset right, and then actually put something together? Because I mean, you even mentioned before about, GPs who aren't thinking about being LPs. Well, let's begin with the end in mind, right? And my end in mind is I want to be a professional passive investor where I'm just a full LP, right? Like a, Jeremy Roll or Steve Setledge or Ian Ippolito, like some of these guys that are out there, and that's all they do is invest full time. I want to end up there where then I can pass that on to my family. Well, then we have to figure out, and we have to diversify, and we have to build up that muscle and that muscle memory while we do that. And the same time, like I really do, my heart breaks for people who go through sudden wealth and have worked hard to get there, because honestly, some people want you to screw up, some people want you to fail, because that makes them feel better about themselves, when the reality is that we have to help each other understand how to do it right. Because I don't know if I call that out in the book, but I did I have a blog post I'm going to publish about this, where, with technology employees, the golden handcuffs can lead to the golden jail, right? The golden handcuffs is the equity that keeps you at a company, but there are people you can let it leak into your lifestyle, and then you're on this hamster wheel, never ending, and sure, they're surrounded by Teslas, and, they're living in these, amazing homes and amazing area, amazing vacations, but they're grinding it out and they're giving every last ounce of their soul to get it. And they don't even know if they can pass it on to their family, because, maybe they've accrued too much debt when it's all done.
Christopher, as we wind down, tell people what you and I have going on and how people can find you and what you have going on beyond multifamily investing.
Sure. So what we have going on is we have thrivecommunity.fund. You can go to that website, thrivecommunity.fund. You can see the webinar on our offering, but we have come together to create for passive investors, for technology employees, for other professionals. We've created this vehicle that we believe is optimal to, in this environment, give you good cash flow and also help you build your equity. So go to thrivecommunity.fund to check that out. And for myself, go to techcareersandmoneytalk.com, where you can then sign up. I've got an email list where I'm talking about what's happening with the book, and then also getting announced when I launch my podcast later this year, where I want to 2 days a week. One day is on career growth in technology company. And for you who are interested in working for equity, that's going to be for you. And then another one where we do talk about, money in all aspects of it. I do want to talk about, crypto, NFTs, all these other things. Obviously, there's going to be passive investing and real estate in there as well. But I want to just put everything on the table as we look to help people grow their careers, build wealth, and make an impact.
Everybody, I'm going to drop all of that in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, whatever, they will be in the show notes. And also, we're a little ahead of the game. So I will, in a few months, when the book's live, the podcast live, everything, I'm going to come back and make sure it's in the show notes. Christopher, thank you so much for coming on. I am so passionate, like you are, about helping people, whether they're working class folks or middle class folks trying to break out of corporate America, or folks who have had wealth events, making smart financial decisions. Because what I've realized in my life is, while money doesn't necessarily buy you happiness, it certainly alleviates a lot of things that will make you unhappy. And having that freedom to go and spend it how you will, with family, on trips, whatever that is, that happiness and that joy that you can experience, then you can go and spread on. So, Christopher, I cannot thank you enough. This has been outstanding. And folks listening in, please go see Christopher, connect with this guy. He will do nothing but continue to impress you. Seriously. Thanks again, Christopher. This was awesome.
All right, Ryan, this was awesome, man. Thanks so much. I always feel stoked when we get time together.